So I finished my first round of thinning and now I'm doing a second thinning, and I was just gonna strap on the action cam and get some thinning action. So this is why I like the second thinning right here, scab or something, looks like scab, which this is practically immune to scab, this variety, which is GoldRush, but that really looks like scab. It's really not a serious problem on this variety, but there's some more right there on both of those. And you know, that's really hard to spot when the apples are really small. So if I kind of just leave a bit extra, it gives me the option to come back now when I can see stuff better and thin some of that off. Now you'll see, like on this one, I didn't thin it at all. 8 fruits on there. That's because this is hand pollinated. So everything past this tag is hand pollinated. Same with this one, you know. So if there's anything else around this whole branch that's gonna compete too much with these, we'll take that off. So I didn't leave any back here. So this is really interesting on this tree. I'm fascinated by the idea of sports, and I'm always looking for them. So a sport is basically a mutation. It can be a slight mutation or a drastic mutation of one bud on the tree that decides to grow different than the rest of the tree. And it can create new varieties. For instance, one I talk about a lot is cherry Cox, which is a Cox orange pippin sport. So sometimes they can be very different. I was just up here thinning and I noticed that these apples on this branch, they're much larger. All of them consistently larger. They're much rounder as well. And it's possible that this branch, since it's fairly large and it only set a few fruits, like I only took a couple of fruits off of here, so it really didn't set that much fruit, that it may just be ahead of the rest and growing larger fruitlets because there weren't very many. But it's different enough, and especially since the shape is different, it makes me really want to keep an eye on this. That would just be so cool to find a sport. And it doesn't mean that the sport's an improvement. In fact, the reason that Golden Delicious went so far downhill, Red Delicious, probably Golden Delicious too, was that they kept selecting sports that were bigger and redder and not sports that necessarily tasted better. When I was a kid, Red Delicious apples were not these huge, solid brick red cone-shaped things. You know, they had the similar shape, but they tended to be more of a greenish color, varying to yellow when they're overripe, and with red stripes. And that's the original Red Delicious, or Hawkeye, is like that. In fact, a friend of mine brought one up. Let's say Sport. My friend Chuck brought up this apple. He's like, yeah, I found this apple. What do you think that is? And I took one look at it and I said, it looks like the old Red Delicious. It was just the shape, and I basically remember Red Delicious that looked like that when I was a kid. And sure enough, one taste and it was really obviously that. Just in general, I think it's probably a better apple, but it's still not an apple style that I like. So I'm not really a fan. But if you like Red Delicious, I would go for more of those older types. Essentially, by selecting sports that were redder and bigger over time, they just became lame. Now here's one I missed way out here. See, look at all that. And I'm still not going quite down to the very final thinning because I'm not seeing worm damage, bug damage yet. Except for, like, there's some bugs I'll show you in a minute when I find one that eat take dents out of the fruit, and a lot more of that has showed up since my first thinning. So I'm taking those off, but I still want to leave a few extra on the tree because I'll be taking off wormy ones later. It's some kind of bugs. I think it might be these crickets that climb up in the tree and they actually are just chewing into the fruit. Later we'll get the, moths that lay their eggs in there, and then the grub gets into the fruit. That's a different problem. Here we go right here. So this again is 1, 2, 3 spots where some kind of bug came in here and chewed on the apple. The bigger these apples get, the more obvious that stuff will all be. Oops, busted that one off. Now there's got to be some kind of cost accounting or cost benefit, kind of around how much the tree is putting into these applets and then taking them off later versus getting them off while they're young and ending up with, say, larger fruit, or taxing the tree's physiology less so it will bear the next year, or, when the tree decides that it's not going to bear much the following year because it bore too much this year. So I don't really know, what to think of all that. That's just, it seems like a pretty dynamic and complicated problem. At this point, I'm pretty into this idea of doing 2 to 3 thinnings and just leaving a little bit extra and then gradually thinning that off as more damaged apples are spotted. One of my catch pits, so it's probably about, I think it's like 7 feet wide, 6 or 7 feet wide, and this is supposedly the real Golden Harvey. Let's hope so. I believe this cutting came from the Geneva collection, which is kind of a government collection of apples, basically. And so hopefully it's the right one. This is a Sweet 16 tree, and it really looks pretty good. I don't want to take too much off of this right now, and I'm just trying to buzz through real fast on this thinning. The main thing I'm looking for is, obviously damaged apples, like this one right here. Bite, bite, bite. Or here we go, look at this one. It's just chewed partly away by some insect or something. Looking for stuff I missed. There's another one right here. Another one right here. That's scab, actually, right there. Here's one right there. See that? See, that's starting to make sense now, right? I'm finding a lot of those. Look at that. If I had thinned this all to a full 6 to 8 inch spread, I'd be cutting into that a lot. And there's a whole nother cull coming when the tree gets a bunch of wormy apples, or maybe it'll decide to drop some apples later. But I am taking it down a little closer and still removing doubles or anything that I didn't thin already. Through the coming weeks, I'll just kind of wander out here once in a while and walk through. And okay, this is King David here. There's a double, don't need that. Okay, now also there's a big difference between what I can afford to do, even at my level where there's, I have quite a few trees here, and it is a lot of work. I mean, it was a lot of work to get this far. But there's still a big difference between me and a commercial operation. Like a commercial orchardist be watching this and probably be like, yeah, right, I'm not going to do that. They're probably going to thin more quickly down to a full thinning. That just makes sense for production. You can't just keep fiddling away, but for the smaller scale yard, the more you can afford to micromanage and fuss over your trees. Again, I don't know if you'll get the very largest fruit. You may need to thin a little earlier to do that, but that's of very little concern to me, getting really large fruit. One of those apples back there, was it Sweet 16 maybe? Looked like kind of a bug magnet. I'm not seeing too much on the King David here. Well, this is going to be a good year for King David, and man, what a good apple. I always underestimated this apple for a long time, even though I kept eating it and thinking it was really good. I was never crazy about the name. It just seemed kind of pedestrian for some reason and unromantic. It's just won me over with flavor over the years. It's got a real rich intensity to it when it's good. And then the Wixen, I'm not going to thin very much this year. I'll probably come through here later and mostly just remove scabby apples. This branch here, I pollinated with the apple medley pollen medleys. So one is a red-fleshed apple pollen medley, and the other one is just a bunch of collection of really good eating apples that I would use in breeding. And I just mixed them all together, and I opened this a couple times. I should have done it every day, but I think I only did it 2 or 3 times already to have more apples. And I just pollinated it and then recovered it with a net. So, there's a bunch of apples on here too for, it looks like around 32, 33 apples. That one's kind of a dud. And then I also made some specific crosses with Wixen, which it looks like this one I didn't write down what the cross was. This one either. That happens every year. I make a few of those, and I just label these with a question mark. So they're probably something like Sweet 16, or there's something interesting. I know that. And I'll just put a question mark on them and sell them cheaper. So there's something good though. All right, here we are at the Cordon trees. This is Allen's Everlasting, big fan. It's not top 10, but it's good. And it's an intriguing and interesting apple. Yeah, these don't need much probably. Gotta watch out for snakes in here, in the tall grass. Need to get that cut. It's a hazard, for real. Lots of rattlesnakes around here. I remember at least 3 I've seen this year. A baby, one that looked like it was pregnant right here, right there in the pile of crap by the greenhouse. Oh, look at that. I didn't label that either. That's so annoying. Ah, look at all of these I pollinated and didn't label. Keener seedling. What would I have crossed with Keener? Probably golden russet, some other russet, or corpenduplat. And I need to thin this out. More. And I'm not even positive this is the real Keener seedling yet, or that it's a good apple here. It was blooming and I was out here. I might as well do a few pollinations because I'm very, very interested in the apple and have high hopes for it. So here's an apple, Bedford Pippin, that is only bearing 1 cluster of fruit on the entire tree. But I still can't really afford to let, 6 apples grow here together. So I'm going to take that down to 3 and see how that does. This is an extremely productive variety. It's called Amoroso, allegedly removed from Albert Etter's experimental orchard. It certainly seems to have some of the characteristics of Wixon, Muscat divinus. Did I say Vixen? Wixon, Vixen. All those Wixon-related apples. There's a little gene pool of apples that Albert Etter was working on. I must have missed this side completely. That definitely had genes in common, crabapple genes, and this is one of them. I have not been impressed with this apple at all. Very scab prone. It's not awesome. It has some intriguing flavor and stuff, but I find little to recommend it. Now for breeding it might be okay, but I would probably go with either Vixen or Wixon on that. Maybe Muscat divinus even. But there's no doubt there's some good genes lurking in there, and it does have that special Wixon crab flavor. So you can see I'm not spending a lot of time doing this. It's just a quick pass. If I wasn't talking, it would be much faster even. Well, here's a bunch of stuff I missed down here. Yeah, ideally you're looking at the apples and trying to pick the best ones and stuff, but a lot of times you're partially proceeding by feel, really. I mean, that's really more the reality of it. These are kind of hard to thin because I let them get too big. I don't know why I missed these. This lizard just lives on this here. Like ever since I grafted it a few weeks ago, he was here then and he just lives on here. But anyway, look at these grafts and how beautifully they're growing out. It looks like this one may not make it, or it might just not have sprouted yet. But most of them are not only sprouted, but they're actually growing out a lot. There's no way a graft can grow this much unless it has resources from the tree. So the plan with this, I think I mentioned this before, is to get these to grow out in fruit really soon and keep them super short and not have them grow excessively. We'll see how that plan works. If it works, that means I have all these cordons here, and a lot of them I don't want. This gives me a huge opportunity to work on a bunch of varieties and just have really short, small amounts of fruiting wood. So I have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 20, 21, like just in this short space right here. Maybe a little crowded, but we'll see. Theoretically, it should not be, actually. Here's another apple that I didn't get to thinning at all. I almost walked by it again. Pretty much ideally I want it to sound like it's raining apples when I'm thinning. That's not always possible. You won't want to focus on something arbitrary and stupid like that to the detriment of the actual goal of thinning fruit to a good density. This right here is Bud 9 rootstock. It's a red fleshed variety, but I've never had the fruit before. Good enough for now. Here's another one I grafted here that was just real skinny scions, and they look like they're gonna go. All three of them too, you know. Here's some stuff I missed. This has got to be Zybergowrie neck because of the size. If the tree doesn't have very many fruits on it, I will leave double fruits, sometimes even triple, but it's pretty much a bad policy because bugs really like to lay their eggs in between any two apples that are touching. Very, very common. So typically you want to remove doubles, if not in the first pass, at least in the second pass, as long as there's enough fruit. Now if there isn't, and especially if you bag the fruits early with foot socks or some kind of other bag, which by the way, this year I'm testing different kinds of bags again. I already got most of them using the Apple Fund generously donated by Mike from Walla Walla. If anyone wants to ever donate to just Apple stuff in general, I have a bank account. It goes in there, although I have borrowed off of it a couple times when I'm broke. It's all earmarked for just Apple projects. So it all gets paid back if I take anything out of it. Okay, so even with talking and screwing around and talking about stuff, it didn't take me that long to do both the Cordon rows and all of the interstem trees for the second pass thinning. Here's a red flesh crab called Seatown Red, and I wasn't really gonna thin this too much just because I don't know. I think it's a small apple anyway, a crab, and I have thinned it a bit, but I think I won't thin it too much more. This is supposedly Dolgo crab. It is also a crab, so I don't want to overthin that either. Now, this is a seedling that we tried last year, which turned out to be not as promising as I hoped. It's a Wixon seedling. There's nothing bad about it at all. It's very pretty. It's small, which, you know, is fine as long as it's good. I don't know, there's just nothing exciting about it, flavor-wise or otherwise. This is Bullock's Pippin, supposedly. We'll see. I don't think I've even had this yet. It's also called American Golden Russet, which is different than the Golden Russet from America that I talk about all the time. Yeah, confusing common apple names. Probably better to call that Bullock's Pippin than American Golden Russet. Here's a scion that I cut off of a tree that was already actively growing, but I just tried to find a section that had some dormant buds on it, and I cut that out and pulled off any leaves if there were any, grafted it on here, and you can see there it's starting to grow. It's not growing past this point, so I'm just going to go ahead and cut it off right there. Now this tree is Pink Parfait, and it really, the density looks okay right now. It's not super heavy bearing right now, so aside from a few things I may have missed, here we go, right here, and damaged fruit. I'm still waiting a bit on this one because I know it gets scab, and we've had some late wet weather, and you know, the scab again will be less obvious, not very obvious early on in the season. So here is a new seedling, and this is a grenadine something. It could be an open pollinated grenadine seed, or it could be one where I just lost the tag and don't know what I pollinated it with. And this is Bite Me, which again also gets very bad scab, and I'm really trying to make myself get in here and thin it a little more. There's just so much fruit on here. So the first pass, I still left quite a bit. And most of it looks pretty good right now, but I kind of feel like I should get in here and just get some more of this fruit off. Just a little closer to a finished fruit density. Dang, I'm looking forward to eating all those and feeding them to people. Yeah, still too much fruit in there. I'll get back in here again. But I don't want it to take another year off completely, which there's a good chance it will. Even already, like, because there's so much fruit on here, and sometimes once they start alternate bearing, which this has, they're hard to jolt out. It seems like it anyway to me. All right, that's it for today. I just thought I'd bring you guys on board for a little bit of secondary thinning. It's kind of hard to keep going, and it's kind of hard to stop. Morning sunshine. Feeling a little sluggish today?